My pleasure to present Luke Kanies, founder and CEO of Puppet Labs.
All right. Good morning. I suppose you guys probably all know who I am at this point. Can I get my slides on the thingamahoosit with the stuff? Sweet. So I speak at this venue periodically for another conference, and it's very strange to have brought our conference here and to be filling the venue up. And by strange, I mean awesome. Things are in general just going really well, but I think one of the fact that we've got 750 people here, we've got at this point about 2,000 people registered for the streams, and I think by the end of this conference we're going to have quite a bit more. I believe the phrase is the Twitters are blowing up or something like that. So, as Nigel said, welcome to the fun. First, I just want to, in terms of how things are going, for me, a lot of it comes down to community. A lot of it comes down to how engaged people are, how interested they are, how much they're talking to each other. Because seriously, I don't do anything anymore. It's all about you. It's all about the people who are talking to each other and the use of the product. So the fact we've got 5,000 people on the mailing list, most mailing lists become dysfunctional after, I don't know, 3 or 4 people. The fact that we've got so many, and it's a helpful community, it's a nice community, which is kind of strange for sysadmins. We've got 1,200 messages a month coming through, and it still is useful content. The IRC channel is fantastic, 800 people talking all the time about Puppet. It's almost impossible to ask a question and not get an answer really quickly. Since we moved all of our development to GitHub in about last year or so, we have seen a huge amount of engagement there. And at this point now, all of our pull requests go through, and you can actually track the progress of the system very well through the GitHub repository. And just in the last 9 months or so, we've seen a doubling the number of the modules on the Forge from to now we've got more than 500. And all those just show how much other people are doing, how much it's not just about Puppet Labs, it's not just about the people in the purple today, I guess. It really is about the entire community. And speaking of community, there are a few people this year who have stood out in terms of what they've done. Tim Sharp has done a lot of work on Puppet Lint and Puppet RSpec, which are great ways to basically validate your code before you put it into production. And it's because of how important Puppet is to actually getting things done in your infrastructure, this is a really important part of the process. So we obviously recommend that before you put anything into production, you go through some sort of test process. And Tim has written some great tools to help you make sure that the code you're putting into production is actually quality. Kind of my favorite is John Bollinger, who, for the first time, finally somebody other than me is the top contributor to the Puppet mailing list. I think this is the top all time. So he's really, the fact that I started so many years ahead of him, and he still is ahead of me now, is fantastic. Brice Figueroa has been a key outside contributor, that is to say, outside of Puppet Labs, for a very long time. He was critically involved in a lot of the development of Puppet, including the device support that was added in 2.7. Dominic Cleal has been hugely helpful on IRC these days, and again, having somebody who's always willing to answer questions, always willing to help, always willing to spend some time engaged, and not just say, here's the docs, but really to walk through problems with people. It's such an important part of being as helpful a community as we are. Stephen Schulte, who is a community contributor, does code reviews, has actual commit access to the repository. He's been great. And then Mitch Sonies has helped to run a bunch of Puppet camps around the country, and that's been hugely helpful. So I just want to say thank you to all of them. So if you can give them a round of applause, I would appreciate it. Speaking of Puppet camps, so our goal this year, those of you who have been around for a while know that we ran a couple of Puppet camps. We've been running them since 2009, so this is officially, I think, the 4th year of events. And we used to do a camp in the US and a camp in Europe, and people said, when are you going to have one near my home? Or when are you going to have one in Australia? Or when are you going to have one on the North Pole? Or things like that. And so last year, we decided to make this split where we have one very large event, which we have decided to call PuppetConf, and then try to have as many regional events around the world. And the model is that we're trying to copy WordCamp, where They're very regionally organized. It's not up to us whether you have one. If you can find a venue and you can get enough content and you can get the logistics in place, we'll do whatever we need to support you. And our goal was to have 6 of these this year. We thought that was relatively aggressive to go from 2 events to 7 in the space of 1 year. That didn't work. Looks like we're going to have 16 Puppet camps this year instead, because there was so much interest in people having these events. And again, a lot of these are local people who are in the local regional area giving talks about what they're doing with Puppet. So to think that you can do it in, yes, Sweden and Geneva and Australia and all over the US, it's really been fantastic. September has been amazing for shipping things. I know technically I say 3.0 there. I don't think we've shipped it today. The last status I heard last night was that 3.0 is we have an RC that we think will be promoted to be the final release version. And I'm getting the nod, yes. Are we there, or are we still just confident? We're still just confident, OK. So test it, but not too thoroughly, maybe is the right way to say that. So yeah, we've had a fantastic month of shipping. We put out Puppet Enterprise 2.6, which is got integration to external auth systems like LDAP, Active Directory, and Google Apps. We've got 3.0, which does a lot of great things. I'm going to talk about that in just a second. PuppetDB 1.0, which people are already using all over the place. Many of you probably know this. PuppetDB is written in Clojure. And Clojure is the Lisp dialect, basically, on the JVM. And we were told by somebody that within about a month of releasing PuppetDB, it was already the most widely deployed Clojure application because there were already thousands and thousands of Puppet users using it in their infrastructures. And you're going to see us building more and more applications on PuppetDB. And mCollective 2.2, which unfortunately Ari couldn't be here this year, which is too bad. But hi, Ari. Hopefully you're watching the streams. He's still been doing great work on mCollective. So many of you probably care about this. One of the best features in Puppet in the new release of Puppet is that it is considerably faster. You can see Eric Sorensen talk about the new release in Fisher at 2:45 today. And one of the, most of you know, or many of you know, that we put out an RC of Puppet about May or June of this year. And for better or worse, we realized that this wasn't a release that was going to make our community really happy. It wasn't going to make all of you really happy. And so we stepped back and said, is this a good idea? Is it something that we're safe doing? We'd rather have it out now or rather wait for who knows how long and get something that we're actually really happy with. And we said, shitty software kind of sucks. So we backed off and said, what do we need to do to make this something that we're actually really, everybody's happy with? So we spent a lot of time on performance. We spent a lot of time on bugs. We went through not just the whole bug database. And Eric Sorensen joined us kind of right in the middle of this and was like, hi, welcome to the party. But went through all the bug databases, went through all the highest voted, all the most watched, all kind of just doing everything he could to figure out the entire list of all the things that anybody cared about, and then do a sort of those and make sure we actually really get all the things done that people care about. So I really think that you're going to find that A, a lot of the bugs you really care about are actually fixed in this. B, it's a lot faster, and C, we spent a lot more time thinking about this isn't about features. It's not about major changes. It's about what are the small things that are going to make it better every day? Another great thing we're doing is many of you participated, I think 140 people participated in the first run of the Puppet certification yesterday. And we think this is a pretty important step for the Puppet community. We have a lot of employers who want to know, how can I tell if they're actually, how good they are at Puppet? How can I be sure? And we have a lot of employees who say they really want to demonstrate their Puppet experience. They want to be able to prove it. They want to be able to not just have it on their resume, but to have real evidence of their Puppet skills. And my goal with the certification, when we launched this, we knew that our goal was to actually have not just something that was the rubber stamp. We don't want this to be something you can take, study for the weekend over and kind of go, look, I was willing to pay $500 and get this piece of paper. In the end, I want our more advanced certificate to be as challenging and as impressive as the CCIE. When I was kind of cutting my teeth as a sysadmin, everyone I knew who had a CCIE, it was like, they were proud and they all knew what number they had of CCIE. And our goal is to make sure our certifications, they are something that if you pass them, you can be proud of. And so certainly, I talked to somebody this morning about it, and he said it was challenging and it was difficult, and that was his big concern. It would be too easy. And it sounds like we did not make it too easy. And Ralph will be talking about certification more tomorrow at 4:35 in meeting room 2. So many of you have probably been hearing us talk about infrastructure as code since the beginning. My goal in starting Puppet, one of my, I think I'd probably say my goal was this, but one of my goals was to get to the point where it felt like maintaining infrastructure felt like maintaining software. Like your infrastructure itself was a large running program, and that when you made changes to Puppet, or when you made changes with Puppet, it felt like making changes to software. And if you saw the Nicira acquisition by VMware in the last month or so, the way they're describing this is software-defined infrastructure, software-defined networking. And the idea is that you don't want to have this world where you've got pieces of hardware that are specialized and pieces and management tools that aren't connected, or you've got the storage pod and the networking pod, and they don't know how to talk to each other. So they want to have this world where one view and one story and one tool can kind of manage the whole thing and manage it like software, whether it's hardware or not. And we've actually done a lot of great work in this in the last year. We've seen Puppet can actually go all the way from physical layer. We've got Razor, and the best way to describe Razor is it's physical provisioning that looks like cloud provisioning. It looks like launching a machine on EC2, but instead is actually building a machine, a physical server. And that's up to obviously Puppet, and then the layers all above that. But we've also got we're managing network devices like Cisco devices. We're managing F5 firewall, F5 load balancers, and we're working with storage vendors and database vendors and networking vendors right now to get Puppet managed across managing all these kind of devices. So it really is very interesting to be able to say that we're getting to the point where it's not just about the systems. It's not just about the one piece of the network that we care about. It's about being able to use Puppet to describe and manage your entire infrastructure. And you can see Dan Bodie talk about how Puppet works with Google Compute Engine in the hands-on labs today, hands-on labs 4 at 1:15. And this is really interesting because what Dan has done is he's actually treating the running nodes in GCE as resources themselves. So he's managing the nodes as resources, and then inside the nodes, he's managing the resources. It gets pretty self-referential pretty quickly. A really important part of this strategy of being able to manage your infrastructure as software is not having to write all the software yourself. We wouldn't be anywhere if we were all having to still write our own database servers and our own web servers and our own device drivers and things like that. Somebody somewhere has to write them, but please, God, let it not be us. And so a big part of that is making it so that it's very easy for you to share the solutions you build. It's very easy for you to find existing solutions that you can rely on to build your own infrastructure. And the Forge has been around for a long time. Well, we've seen a really huge uptick in usage of it recently. Again, both the doubling of the modules that are on the Forge and then also dramatic increase in the number of downloads. And we've seen a lot of people actually using this in production. And you can see Ryan Coleman talk today at 11:30 in meeting room 1 about what else is happening in the Forge recently. We pushed quite a few changes to it recently, and Ryan is pushing aggressively to get a lot more done there. Another thing that we in the Puppet community, that is to say you in the Puppet community, have spent a lot of time on is DevOps. And I think most people would agree that no one knows what the heck this means. But for me, it's always been a lot like agile operations. It's been about both being able to move more quickly, being able to respond more quickly to your actual customers, and getting to the point where in IT you're not as much focused on what are the rules, what are the processes, how can I quickly get to say no, how can I quickly shut you down and be slower, instead of moving to a world where you want to be able to say, what is the actual problem? What is the real business need? Let's be able to satisfy that. Why don't I make it so that the user can do it themselves? Not because I'm lazy, which I am, but because they actually are happier that way. Unfortunately, it's not really working that well. The future is already here. There are a lot of great organizations out there that have great IT, that have great technology, that have something they're proud of. That's not most of us, though. That's not most organizations. There are a lot of organizations that still don't know nearly enough about their infrastructure, that still don't know how, we've had customers who, before they started using Puppet, they had forgotten how to deploy software, or it was costing them more money to deploy software than it was to develop software. This isn't uncommon. This isn't rare. This is still a serious problem that, we in the Puppet community feel like, well, this is all obvious. This is all, clearly. You just have to work this way. But most of the rest of the world still doesn't see this yet. And a big part of the problem is that there really is very little automation software out there. There's a ton of products, but if you go into your average organization and say, do they have a piece of software they're using to manage all the major parts of their infrastructure? The answer is probably no. Or if the answer is yes, it's probably a Perl script that someone wrote in 1999 and has been applying spackle and duct tape to since then. Fortunately, you are actually making it better. We've seen people who are posting jobs actually saying, they're looking for this kind of skill. They've recognized that people with Puppet skills, people with DevOps skills are actually the ones who are driving change into their infrastructure, into their organization. So that really is making a big difference. And one of the things we've been seeing, and this is something that I call this a maybe because I'm not entirely positive this is really happening. But one of the things we've been seeing is, we know that most people who are doing DevOps like things, people who are trying to manage their software, their infrastructure like it was software, they come out of the system space. But we're finding that as their tools get better, as they get more able to not just have to focus on how do I install packages, how do I tell if this service is running, how do I change this user's password, and they can up-level and spend a little time instead thinking about what's the overall problem, what's the largest, most important problem in the organization. They start to think about networking more. They start to think about the storage and the databases, and they begin to be able to build tools. And this is what we're seeing in our own customer base, being able to build tools that can manage all of these at the same time. And these people aren't all sysadmins, but they're kind of becoming this one admin that manages all of it. So instead of these 4 separate areas, because if you look at how Gartner or Forrester talks about management, they're going to say, well, there's the system space, the network storage, and database. And those are all very large industries, and they're all very segregated, very separate, and no tools work across all of them. What we're finding is that the people who have moved up the stack are actually being able to work across all those spaces. And what it means is, it's just better for everybody, right? It means that you get to actually have control of the entire system instead of just the little slice of reality that matters to you normally. And that also means that for your company, for your customer, for the people you work with, you don't ever have to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't do that. The networking team takes 2 weeks to update the configurations, or the person who runs networking kind of despises the person who runs storage, and so we have to have this one person go between. And I'm sure this never happened to any of you before, though, right? So I want to talk a little bit about the future of Puppet and how we think about product development at Puppet Labs. Last year, I told you that Puppet Labs is quickly becoming a design-focused company, a very user-focused company. And my point then was that we've always been focused on building the easiest to use product, building the simplest product, not in the sense of it can't do very much, but in the sense of we'd always rather have it be easier to adopt and easier to use than have more pieces of functionality. And Randall Hansen is going to talk more about design today at 10:45 in Fisher about what's going on in design at Puppet Labs. But we've made a lot of progress. This time last year, I think we had 1 full-time designer. Now we have 7, including a visual designer who was responsible for all the great banners and logos and things like that. And I just want to be clear that there were no designers used in the production of this slide. So when I first started talking about Puppet at conferences, I would go out and I'd spend half the time talking about how this product is great. You can use it to solve real problems right now. You can start downloading it during this presentation, and by the end of the presentation, you can be doing real work. And that's how Nigel Kirsten started using Puppet, for instance. In the course of a presentation by Jeff McCune, he started actually doing real things. And he went, wow, I don't have to kind of just believe him. I can test it. But then I'd spend the other half of the talk talking about how awesome the platform was, how it wasn't just a tool. It was a platform. You could build things on. It was a framework you could use to do other, bigger, more interesting things. And I found that during the talk where I was talking about solving real problems right now, people were engaged. They were paying attention. They were tapping their feet. But during the part where I was talking about platforms, they were nodding. They were sleeping. They were clearly doing email. And so I learned not to talk about the platform because, seriously, no one cares. But we still tried to focus on it. We still tried to make sure that it wasn't just a single use case application. It was something that had this veneer of an application, had this veneer of a use case, but there was something that was much more powerful than that. You could do a lot more. And what you've seen in the last year and a half is us pushing more and more to try to do that, to try to take all of our open source software and make it actually look like a platform. Try to canonicalize the APIs, the formats, the protocols. Try to make it so that Puppet and mCollective, for instance, they're tightly integrated via published APIs. We've still got a lot of work to do on this, but again, this is strategy, which means that stuff we're going to probably do someday as opposed to things we're doing right now. And And that's the ultimate goal for our open source projects, for our platform, is to make it so that it is the thing on which you build everything. And there are a lot of companies who build open source, and their open source business model is that their open source software sucks and their commercial software doesn't. Obviously, that's not our goal. Our goal is to have a fantastic platform, a fantastic open platform. And then what we're going to do is build applications on top of that platform. And some of those applications are going to be commercial, like live management. That's a great example of something we built into Puppet Enterprise that there's no way we could have built that without Puppet. There's no way we could have built that without Uncollective. Or we could have, but it would have taken 10 times as long. We were able to get almost all the functionality was in the system already. And it was just about picking what is the workflow we want? What is the actual use case, the application we're trying to build? Let's just build that on top of the existing functionality. And then third, again, is the forge, is the modules. This content is a critical part of our long-term strategy because, again, we think it's really important that you not have to start from scratch. You probably aren't maintaining MySQL in a fundamentally, strangely different way than everybody else. And if you are, you probably need to have, the rest of your system is not special. And frankly, if your entire system is special, you're probably doing it wrong. So as we look at building product, as we look at where to invest in development, this is how we draw our lines. And actually, if you look at our organization is separated like this. We've got a platform team, and an application team, and a modules, and a forge team. And they've all got their own product owner. They've all got their own designers. They've all got their own engineering resources. It's because they all need to work closely together, but they all need to make sure that everything they produce is fantastic on its own also. It looks like I'm going to finish quite a bit early. I practiced this talk, I think, 6 times, and every time I was like, 27 minutes, 27 minutes. Apparently not. So one of my favorite, of all the razors that are out there, my favorite razor is Hamlins Razor, which is never a tribute to malice, that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. And the way that I think of that is I'd far rather you think that I'm dumb than evil. We, as an organization, are learning all the time. We do our best to be open-minded. We do our best to take risks. We do our best to try not to spend too much time thinking about whether we have the exact, perfect, incredibly, entirely right answer. And we'd much rather move quickly and be willing to admit our mistakes than spend 3 times as long thinking about something. Because probably you're going to get it wrong anyway, so you might as well get it wrong soon and be able to react more quickly. So we as an organization are really focused on learning all the time. And part of that is that we do make mistakes. We do screw things up once in a while. And one of the things that we're trying to do right now to make it so we're far less likely to screw things up. Again, I'm not saying we're not going to screw things up. I'm not going to make promises I can't keep. But at PuppetConf, we've launched the Puppet Test Pilots program. And this is something that we're really excited about because it's basically a way for us to make sure that as much as we possibly can, every product we build, every bit of code we write is something that our users are excited about. So what we want to do is take from the concept phase, from something that is as simple as some pieces of paper of this is what we think it might look like, put those in front of users, and not just like once in a while. We're not going to have a conference once a year and do some user tests and then go back to our caves and do all of our development. We're talking about every week. Randall is tracking how often we talk to users on every single product we build. And the goal is to talk to users constantly. The goal is to have hundreds of people in the pipeline of people who can actually do these kind of user tests. And then to take the results of these tests and iterate them very quickly. So you start with paper prototypes, and then you begin to build something that looks kind of like a functional code prototype. And then only when you've got something that you're actually confident, this is a good idea, and we know how to build it, and the users like it, only then do you say, OK, now let's actually build the real product. So that by the time it comes out the door, you can have a much higher degree of confidence that it's something that people really like. So this is what we're trying to do to make sure that we stay a learning organization. We don't want to lose that. But we stay very focused on what the users really want. Don't get me wrong. I have a clear, complete idea of what everything should look like all the time. But once in a while, I've heard we need to listen to other people too. And speaking of the things that we're building, I'm really personally very excited about PuppetDB. For multiple reasons, I've been trying to build what we'd call store configs for a long time. I wanted that to be the heart of the Puppet infrastructure for a very long time, and it was just never fast enough. And so I think I first wrote it in 2006. And so to finally have something that is performant enough that we can get 30,000 machines worth of load onto the developer laptop, that is just fantastic. And it's overdue, and you're going to see a lot of people building really, really great things on PuppetDB. So just to give you a quick example, this is a very fast demo that Nick, I believe Deepak stood near Nick while he did all the work. I'm not sure exactly. So this is a graph pulled from PuppetDB. And you can see that you can mouse over all the resources and see up in the corner what each resource is. And you can search for what you want. And I'm going to, OK. So searching, in this case, for PuppetDB, where you can see the file service, package file service pattern clearly in use here. The highlighted edges are everything that might affect or be affected by the matching resources. So that's pretty interesting. And then we search for Postgres. And let's see. You can see that I don't know what we're supposed to see out of that, frankly. I'm supposed to talk through this thing. But and then in the end, you can see this. This is actually the graph, right? We spend all the time talking about the graph. Well, PuppetDB actually owns that graph. It has a copy of it. You can interact with it. You can get all the edges, all the resources. And so this is an example of us building an application on top of PuppetDB. And we're going to be working to get this in front of you and testing. What do you want out of this? Because I mean, this is pretty cool. But this isn't. This isn't the answer. This isn't the end game. This isn't the ultimate thing that you want to see in terms of graphs. So we want to take this idea and turn it into a product that you're really excited about. And that's it from me. And thank you.